Andrew, welcome to the show. Will you please let our audience know a little bit about your background, what you're doing today? I think it's ideal timing to have you here, and you're going to have some great insights for everybody.
Yeah, thanks, David. I really appreciate being on the show. So what I'm doing today is I work with people to help identify when they're in an ineffective mental state for the situation and shift to a more effective one. So if you are experiencing stress and you make a poor decision because of it, if you are overwhelmed by your to-do list and don't know what to do next, if you push send too fast on an email, if you're involved in the news cycle and being overwhelmed by it, these are all times when we're in ineffective mental states. All I do is work with corporations to help people notice those states more quickly and shift to effective ones.
Wow. And what's your background that led you to do this?
Yeah, so a very analytical mind, a very critical and skeptical mind, a lot of self-exploration, and some training. So I studied as an engineer. I like math and science much better than reading and writing. I realized that, well, I can take physics and chemistry classes rather than history. That sounds amazing. I then went to go work for the Boston Consulting Group after school. I was there for 5 years, ended up leaving managing project teams. And there I kind of got a sense for how the world goes round through profit-driven companies, the types of problems they have, the way that people are influenced and make decisions there, and more importantly, how people are or aren't working effectively in those companies to solve those problems. I left a little bit curious about what made me happy and fulfilled myself, not really knowing what. And through a bunch of experiences over a year, I realized that all the people around me seem to have objectively great lives, but are a bit more miserable than they should be. Stable job, safe country they live in, good family environment, food on the table whenever they want. And for some reason, they weren't happy. And so I started learning through exploration that everything that happens to us goes through this filter that's called our brain. And the way that our brain filters that information is the source of our happiness and fulfillment. Ended up getting certified mindfulness and emotional intelligence training and habit formation coaching. And now I'm bringing content and training to companies to help them with that.
Wow. And so also I noticed, I think on your website that you kind of do a polar opposite routine of this exercise that kills many people, almost, at least it sounds like it. You didn't say that on your website. And then the other side of the spectrum, you do this meditation thing. So talk to me a little bit about that and whether that plays into, your life experience and how you apply all this knowledge you've got.
Yeah, and when you say exercise that kills many people, are you referring to like climbing and endurance and adrenaline sports?
Yeah, that's what you're talking about, this like ultra endurance sports or something like that. Forgive me for not having it down pat, but.
Yeah, so I would say that there are a lot of things that kill people: car accidents, sports, the coronavirus. There's a lot of dangers that society doesn't perceive appropriately, and I think that kind of these sports allows you to bring more explicitly to mind the risks that we are taking in every environment. My dad road bikes. I'm terrified of him road biking. That's one of the most dangerous sports in the world, I think, because your opportunity to get hit by a car is so risky. But that's an aside. The reason why I like climbing or slacklining or ultra marathons is because it's pushing me into the unknown, to do things that really force me to perform in difficult environments, and pushes me to actually have to execute in difficult situations that kind of help me grow and learn about myself. And with meditation, it's the exact same thing. Sitting for long periods of time, exploring the internal thoughts that are in my head and discomforts and my emotional experience around what's happening or nothing that's happening, also pushes me to learn more and grow as well.
I'm kind of curious. This is a rabbit trail, maybe, so forgive me. But I'm kind of curious with the climbing and the slacklining. Has that also impacted how you're applying your knowledge about how the brain processes information?
Yeah, so I guess I like putting myself in intense emotional situations and then managing through that. And we experience intense emotional situations at work. We experience intense emotional situations when there's a crisis. And you can also voluntarily experience intense emotional situations when you are doing sports or extracurricular activities.
So I'm curious. You talk about this intensity. Obviously, we've had some intensity today. The day that we're recording this, stock market's dropped almost 3,000 points, and we have the COVID or coronavirus going on, different things. So how the leaders that you're speaking with, how is this affecting them and how they're processing information?
Yeah, so ironically, a lot of leaders that I'm speaking with are very burnt out from discussing the coronavirus. Like, we just need to talk about like what our meeting was today, like helping people manage stress, which is a problem independent of the coronavirus. Um, I think there's a bunch of things that leaders can do tactically when they're thinking about leading in the coronavirus. The first is taking care of themselves and their own mental state. So it's really easy to get caught up in these news cycles. And you could spend 24 hours in the New York Times and you would feel awful if you continued to read the updates. But you actually want to think about kind of a more balanced worldview. So yes, the stock market has crashed today. Do you need to take money out of the stock market right now? For most people that are probably listening to these podcasts, the answer is no. Okay, well then who cares? If you invested like in the next, and you need money in the next 10 years, history shows that it will come back. So it's actually not that important that the stock market has crashed. And you can be grateful that you don't need to take money out now. Now, if you need to take money out of the stock market now, there's other things that you'll have to be grateful for to balance that out. But there are always tons of things that are happening now that we can be grateful for. And holding those amidst the the crisis, not pushing away the negative impact of the crisis on us emotionally, but just holding things that we're grateful for at the same time that we can hold the negative impact of the crisis goes a long way in being resilient through it.
So can you give me an example of maybe somebody you've worked with that was struggling in this area? It sounds like you're talking about having a balance in your perspective, and they were always glasses half full or empty versus
Yeah.
recognizing anything that was going well, and how your work with them kind of helped them find better balance.
Yeah. So the difficult thing about this is, let's say you want to get stronger, and you have a family member that is being pinned by a car. So you're like, I want to get stronger now, so I can lift this car up. Well, now is not the time to get stronger. Like, you need to use your strength now. You could have been getting stronger for a while in order to use the strength. So now is the time that people want to use their emotional strength. And so they can't expect overnight to be able to develop emotional resiliency to manage through this crisis. There are things that they can be doing, though, that are short and simple that will make a meaningful impact in how they're experiencing the world now, that will bring them on the road to meaningful change later. And I think there's three things that need to come together that I work with my clients on at the same time for them to make a change. Awareness of what's actually happening real time, a tool to pull off the shelf to actually change. If you want to change what's happening real time, you can do that. And then habits using the tools so you can use them in difficult situations because you've practiced using them in easy situations. So if I'm on a mental spin that the stock market has crashed 3,000 points today, and I have about 90% of my investment in the stock market. Fortunately, I don't need any of it for the next 10 years. Okay, first, awareness that I'm in a mental spin. A tool to pull off the shelf, I would say in this case, noticing goodness is a tool we were talking about, that I can acknowledge what's happening and also redirect my thoughts towards something that's also good that's happening in my life. And then habits using that tool, noticing goodness, in easier situations, so I just know how to use it. So I can do it even when it's hard. And those three things coming together at one time actually help people shift what's happening in their mind, which makes it more available for them to lead, for them to manage, for them to really put a lot of energy into work or fix whatever problem is at hand for them.
So about how long does it take to, you talk about habits, how long does it take to build a habit where you can do that on a regular basis?
Yeah, so there's this myth. Everyone's like, oh, it takes 21 days or 28 days or 2 months to form a habit. I've tried so hard to track down the studies where this comes from, and I have no idea where it comes from. There is no scientific agreement on how quickly you can form a habit. We form habits emotionally. So you form a habit based on having a unintended positive emotional experience immediately after doing an action. So if you do something like, I'll give you an example. I have this pen. It's a Pilot G2. I used to like it, but one day I picked up a Pilot V7. It's this fine tip pen, and I wrote with it. And I was like, "Whoa, this is so much better! Like the ink flows much better. I liked it a lot better. I had a very unintended positive emotional experience. So there was a huge reward prediction error. Our brain is basically trying to figure out, based on what we're doing, what the reward is we're going to get. And when there's a reward prediction error, our brain says, either I want to do that again or I don't want to do that again, depending on if it's positive or negative. And then you, because there's a dopamine increase, and the dopamine increase helps increase the thickness of the myelin sheath to actually wire the neurons together so that you actually want to do that again. Okay, a bit neuroscience there. But the key message is the more you have an unintended positive experience doing something, the more likely it will wire into your brain for you to automatically do it again. So that pen experience, I only pick up that pen now. That's a habit after one time. If you want to form a habit around something, the more you can have a positive emotional experience afterwards, the more quickly it will wire in. From my personal experience, I've formed habits in as short as 2 days. I've also tried forming habits and never formed them. So it's about habit design and really pivoting towards designing habits that are working effectively and dropping the ones that aren't working effectively and trying again.
So you also mentioned it has to be unintended. How much does it have to be unintended versus just having a low expectation or a neutral expectation?
Well, so if you have a lower neutral expectation and then have a positive experience, that would trigger a reward prediction error to be relatively high. Uh, if you are expecting, if you have a dog, dogs are great at this. I tell my dog to sit and then lie down and then come over here, and we're going through this routine where he's about to get fed. The dopamine in his brain hits before he actually gets fed. So he gets the reward in his brain before the actual reward comes because he's so programmed to expect it. So if he doesn't get the reward, there's going to be a huge drop, and he's going to have and there's going to be a negative prediction error. If he does get the expected reward, well, he's actually flatlined because he already got the reward as soon as the routine started. So it happens with us too. Like if we're expecting to get a benefit from doing something and we get it, that's great. We did the benefit. Activity is already wired into our brain. We're changing the brain's wiring, concept called neuroplasticity, when the reward prediction error is bigger, positive or negative.
So do you work with leaders, and do they actually intentionally try to structure something to teach their people a new habit, or one person a new habit, by really planning out the reward in advance, but kind of but not explaining the reward all the way so it can have the big rush?
Yeah, so we work with leaders directly to help them form habits.
Okay.
And then we also work with their people to help them form habits. But most of our habits are around how to lead, like for a leader, how to lead better. Helping people form habits, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. We haven't had success empowering, training up leaders to help their people design habits as well. And there's a lot of mechanics around how to design a habit loop and what to do if it's not working that is quite tactical. Leaders, their time is better spent developing good habits themselves and then leading their teams effectively.
And I remember reading the Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and he was saying that the bad habits never go away. Have you found that that's true also?
Yeah, so Charles Duhigg says a habit loop is a cue followed by a routine followed by a reward, right? So a cue is I get out of bed. My routine is I drink coffee. My reward is I'm alert and caffeinated. Cue is I am about to work on a hard task and I want to feel productive. So my routine is I check email. My reward is I have a fleeting feeling of productivity. This is a bad habit, but habits can be good or bad. If you want to change a habit, it's really hard just to not do the routine when you experience a cue. So there's a couple things you can do. You can remove the cue. or you can replace the routine. And that's pretty much it. So if you don't experience a cue, like for example, I walk into my house and there's a bag of chocolate chips sitting uh, on my kitchen. The bag of chocolate chips is a cue for me to eat chocolate chips, and the reward is they're tasty. If I remove the cue, I usually won't eat the chocolate chips. I don't go into the pantry and look for them. Just the cue is removed.
Yeah, but you've got control over that. What about a cue that you have no control? So what about a cue that you have a cue that if somebody talks to you disrespectfully, you get angry, and you're in a particular role, a position with maybe, let's say, customer service, where people call up and they're frustrated and they're angry and they have a certain number of them happen to attack the person on the other phone verbally, although they had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So what do you do there? Because that cue you have no control over. It's always going to be there.
Yeah. So the cue isn't the person does something to you. I think the cue is something triggered, like you feel an emotional experience in your body. Like you feel anger rising up, starting, usually people feel anger kind of in their chest, and it rises up and comes exploding out of their head, or their fists get really tight. I think what you're talking about is an emotional reaction. And the goal is to move from like emotionally reacting to thoughtfully responding. And so in order to move from emotionally reacting to thoughtfully responding, you have to do one thing, and that is think. That's it. You have to activate your thinking brain. And if you're actually thinking about what you're doing, you in all likelihood will choose a different response. Now, activating your thinking brain is quite hard because your amygdala has hijacked your brain, basically, and you are just reacting, which is helpful if you're about to get hit by a car and jump out of the way, not so helpful if you're reacting to a customer and you're on the phone trying to deal with their problem. And so there are exercises that you can do around noticing emotions, so that when you experience a strong emotion, you can identify it and then ramp up your thinking brain all before you respond, all in 1 or 2 seconds. But that's more to break that habit. It's more around increasing your emotional awareness.
And is that emotional awareness then also at times, since you're trying to, it sounds like you're trying to eliminate the cue, or you're saying it's not a cue, but before the person picks up the phone, they're not going to have an expectation it's going to go okay. They're going to have an expectation that someone's going to yell at them. So that potentially enables them to be more in control. Is that part of what?
So in terms of emotional awareness, the problem with emotions is they only happen real time right now. So it's hard to think about emotions you're going to experience in the future or reflect on emotions you've experienced in the past and then do something with them. Like we only experience emotions right now. And so the key skill is getting better at identifying your emotions real time. The thing that holds most people back from being able to do this is we as a society are terrible at focusing on what's happening right now. We're very distracted. So the way that we work with folks is we typically start with mindfulness. Mindfulness is just being aware of what's happening as it's happening. Once you can direct your attention to the present, then you can turn your attention to your body. Emotions manifest themselves as physiological sensations in your body. So the more you can direct your attention to what's happening in your body, the more emotional data you get, real time, and the more you can thoughtfully choose how you want to respond rather than let emotions control you.
So what about an executive, or actually it could be anybody, but in particular an executive or an owner of an entrepreneurial organization who gets too caught up working in the business. Maybe they're a lead tech. They're a technical person. They started an IT services business and they're just doing a lot of technical work constantly versus really working on the business and driving that. How do you click them into developing the awareness and changing some habits?
Yeah, so developing awareness of if you're working in the business or on the business. So I imagine what's happening is most people will finish their day and they're like, wow, I didn't get to anything that I wanted to today. I was just putting out fires, or I was just, working on these things. And when they have the hindsight of their day, they're like, I didn't spend my time the way that I wanted to. Um, the trick is to be able to pull that awareness rather than hindsight to in the moment. And the way that you increase awareness around anything is you first figure out tools that will actually help with what you're trying to solve. Then you form habits around using those tools, and then your awareness will increase. So if you want to get more aware on what you're doing on a moment by moment basis in terms of is it in the business or on the business, you need a tool to be able to effectively categorize like what things fall in the business, what things fall on the business, and then habits actually categorizing how you're spending your time. And if you're doing that at the end of each day, your awareness throughout how you're spending the time each day will increase very quickly. And then when you have awareness in the moment, you can more thoughtfully say, is this something someone else should deal with because I need to work on the business, or is this actually worth my time? And that's when the real change starts happening.
Yeah, I mean, it also seems that there needs to. I'm thinking of the model that you've described. There's actually a high percentage of these type of people who are comfortable working in the business. And years pass. I met one guy whose business was basically his revenue was $1 million or so for 20 years. And even though I finished the talk and he said, I said, if that's where you're stuck, you need to get out of that. You need to really wake up. And if you want to grow, if you just have a lifestyle business, that's fine. But he stated he wanted to grow, but I haven't run across him again, but I have no evidence that he actually made any changes. So do some people just get stuck in that cycle, even though they're aware of it? They don't, is it that the reward isn't, they can't sense the reward because they're just used to trudging along?
Yeah, I think awareness serves as like a flashlight, where once you have strong awareness, once you shine the light in a certain area, you can't unsee it ever again. And because you can't unsee it, it meaningfully changes your behavior. So my challenge is how much awareness did he really have? Maybe he didn't have enough awareness around like what he wanted out of that business or around what his actions on a day-to-day basis were and how they were making him feel. It's hard for me to talk about him given that I don't know the context.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, you're welcome to use an example yourself. But I'm also wondering, sometimes there are employees nowadays, we hear mostly complaints about millennials who may have a behavior that's not a productive behavior in the workplace. And I think I see it across all ages. So I think it's kind of, although there may be some more in the millennial space. But if I'm understanding you correctly, this reward piece, this unexpected level of reward piece is critical. And it sounds like not enough leaders are really thinking that out of how to structure something so that can happen and they can really experience it and then want to change. Because don't they become self-motivated when that happens to drive the change themselves?
Yeah, and what it's really helpful to talk more specifically. Like what change are you referring to? Can you give me an example?
I don't know. Let's just take somebody that shows up late to work almost every day.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Okay.
simple.
So you're a manager and one of your employees is showing up late to work every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So on showing up late to work, you think about like what is the habit? Well, there's probably a bunch of habits that are happening before he shows up late to work that are driving him being late. And so, as a manager, you're not going to like jump into behavior design with this person to help him figure it out. But what you might do is relate to this person as like a human. So first, remember that this person probably doesn't want to be late to work. Like most of us don't wake up being like, oh, I'm going to be late to work today and it's going to be okay. And so the thing that you do isn't going to be, hey, you're showing up late to work. This is a problem you need to stop. So that's not going to help. This person doesn't want to be late to work, but he is.
I think there are a lot of people that just think it's okay. Particularly because then you have the flip side, you got the manager is what are they going to do? Are they going
Yeah.
to yell, but then allow it? Are they going to nag, but not do anything about it? Or are they going to follow more of a process of verbal warning, write up, and whatever?
So millennials are very, and I'm a millennial myself, a very interesting generation. We are very compliant if we understand the why. And we completely disregard anything that we don't understand. So if I understand why showing up on time to work makes a meaningful difference for my team, then I will be more likely to do it. If I don't understand why, there is nothing that you can do to get me to show up on time to work. And so my question is first, like, is showing up on time to work important for the functioning of the team, the organization, how you serve customers? That's like a really important first question to ask. And
Yeah.
then if it is, okay, well, all you have to do is explain why to the people that you're managing, and then hold them accountable to that. But if you can't explain why, well, then maybe you should reevaluate how important it is to show up on time. I mean, it's obviously important um, to be effective at work and deliver value to the client or customer or whatever industry you're in. But a lot of industries these days, it doesn't really matter what time you show up to work.
Yeah. I mean, it's a difference. I mean, it really varies. So I'm curious if you have a story of, massive transformation in somebody that you worked with who was causing other people grief on their team, whether it was they were the leader or they were a member of the team, and you were able to, start here and really transform it over here.
So I think I work specifically on internal transformations. I was thinking of a client that comes to mind who works. Was a partner at a management consulting firm, a top three management consulting firm. And I think over the past like 4 or 5 years, kind of stress had slowly built up over time, with his job and also some things that were happening in his personal life. And ironically, during a training he was participating in, he came to me and said, "Hey, I saw this client that I hadn't seen in 5 years." This is at the beginning of the training. And she said, "Wow, you seem a lot more stressed than you were before," which is a perfect way to start the training. Because he's like, "I had no idea. I was so stressed. And now this client who I haven't seen in 5 years is telling me how stressed I am. Like, what do I do?" And by the end of the training, he started being able to notice real time when he was stressed, being like, "Oh, this is how stress feels in my body. This is how it builds up over time. This is how I actually manage it on a moment by moment basis, so I don't let it build. So I don't start snapping at my significant other. So I don't send those curt emails to the team that cause the team to spin unproductively." Um, and he was able to start. It's a long process, but he was able to start relating to it in ways to have the stress self resolve and be more present and more effective for the people that he wanted to support, including his team and his kids and his wife.
Well, that's great. And how long was the training that kind of led to this transformation?
Yeah, 10 weeks. So my trainings are
Okay.
very intense. 10 weeks, a mix of in-person sessions, one-on-one coaching, text message interaction, kind of full court press to really get into your daily life.
Great. Well, I think this is really timely for people under the different stresses that are going on today. So, what would you be kind of your final advice to people as we close out the podcast, and then how to get a hold of you for people to keep in mind? Because I'm really intrigued by what you're saying with the rewards and being more aware in these different pieces.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of interesting content out there on how to manage teams and how to manage others and also how to manage yourself. And it's really hard to take action on the content unless you form habits around it. And so behavior design and habit formation is kind of the thing that starts moving the needle in what folks are learning, and that's really where they have the most difficulty. So my advice to you would be first, focus on things that you already want to do, and second, help yourself feel successful in doing it. If you do those two things and apply it to anything, you will be shocked in the results that you see. Um, feel free to reach out to me. My website, dynamiclc.com or dynamicleadershipcenter.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn or Instagram at just Andrew Wien, Wien.
Fantastic, Andrew. Well, thank you for coming on today. Really appreciate the insights. I'm sure our audience got some good tips.
Great. Thanks, David. I appreciate it.